Hello everybody, my name is Mike Gaudette and welcome back to another installment of Top 5 Albums, the series where I take you through my 5 favorite albums from every year. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the year 1978, another year that saw a lot of stylistic changes taking place, with new genres becoming much more prevalent like industrial, post-punk, new wave, and disco, and we had seen some of these changes start to come to fruition in the previous years, but now as we get closer and closer to the new decade of the 80s, we really start to hear these new styles become much more common and really explode in popularity, and it would really transform the trajectory of music for the coming years and set up a whole new framework for 80s music to continue to build off of. And it was another very exciting year for music that spawned so many classic records and so many pivotal albums for a variety of different genres of music that were very new and very groundbreaking for the time that they were recorded. So without further ado, here are my top 5 favorite albums of 1978, starting with number 5. Coming in at number 5 is One Nation Under a Groove by Funkadelic, one of the most classic and legendary records of Funkadelic's entire discography, in my opinion. Stylistically, it delivers this amazing fusion of funk, soul, R&B, and rock, and conceptually it has this beautiful theme centered around music and the ability of music to unite people together, and this whole idea of a new nation being established that would be unified under funk music, hence the title of the record. And the original LP was 6 tracks long with 3 songs on each side, and I think from front to back this record is incredible, not one skip over track, and just filled with so many tasteful and groovy moments. Side 1 delivers 3 incredible tracks, all of which contrast each other very nicely, starting out with the title track, One Nation Under a Groove, which is a song that kicks off the album beautifully. It's got a great energy to it, and it really captures the listener right off the bat and just grabs your attention. And then track 2, Groove Allegiance, brings the tempo down a bit and gives us another rock-solid funk track with a seriously groovy bass and drum part. And then side 1 concludes with Who Says a Funk Band Can't Play Rock, which is such an awesome and feel-good track, and it concludes side 1 in the best way possible. I particularly love the guitar tone on this one, really awesome distortion, and it just complements the mood of this song so nicely. Side 2 then gives us 3 more amazing tracks, opening up with 2 that are more on the down-tempo side of things, starting with the Doo-Doo Chasers, which has my personal favorite bass line of the entire record, and the combination of that bass line and the slower tempo just creates the most groovy atmosphere possible. Absolutely incredible song to kickstart side 2. And then that is followed by the main ballad from this album titled Into You, which would easily be my favorite song from this record. I think that track is absolutely beautiful, and I love the placement of it as the second to last track. It sets up the final song very nicely, which is titled Charlie, and that track is another amazing funk number with a really great groove to it, and it just concludes this album in the best way possible. So when it comes to funk albums, I think this one should be required listening. I love everything about the songwriting throughout this, so many groovy and tasteful moments, but also a lot of depth and subtleties to this songwriting, and they're throwing in a lot of different stuff that really keeps the listener on the edge of their seat, and it makes for a very enjoyable and very dynamic record that I would consider to be the best album of Funkadelic's entire discography. So that is my number 5 album of 1978. Now on to number 4. Alright, coming in at number 4 is Ambient 1, Music for Airports by Brian Eno. This is one of Brian Eno's earliest records within that ambient music category, and he had become more interested in this style of music after being in a car accident in the mid-70s, and while recovering in the hospital, he had started exploring this type of music more, and his intention behind it was to induce calmness and give the listener a space to think. And this album features 4 tracks, all on the longer side, with one being over 16 minutes in length and another one being over 11 minutes, and then the other 2 being 6 minutes and a little over 8 minutes in length. And the stretched out ambient nature of these tracks really allows the listener to go into these deep meditative states. And oftentimes I put this record on if I need something to center me and get me in a more mellow headspace. The majority of the instrumentations on this album are combinations of piano, synthesizers, guitars and vocal loops. And the vocal loops don't have any lyrical content to them, but are more held out notes and melodies and harmonies. And I really love the journey that this album takes you through, and it has this amazing ability to induce these really deep, meditative, and relaxing states of mind. And although Brian Eno had dabbled in a little bit of ambient stuff prior to this record, I think this was his first pivotal release of that ambient music genre that set up a whole new trajectory for him to continue to build off of in his future albums. And for me, this album will always be near and dear to my heart and has helped me through a lot of tough times throughout my life, and it's an album that I still go back to this day. So an amazing record that was a turning point for Brian Eno's stylistic changes that he would make in his discography, and a classic ambient record to come out of the year 1978. So that is my number 4 album. Now on to number 3. Coming in at number 3 is Van Halen's self-titled debut studio album, a record that sounds so fresh and so ahead of its time. And for me as a guitar player, you cannot overstate how influential and how pivotal this record was for the world of guitar. This album should be required listening for any aspiring guitar player. The amount of guitar players that were influenced by this record and by Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing just cannot be overstated. This album is 11 tracks long with 5 songs on side 1 and 6 songs on side 2, and side 1 almost plays through like a greatest hits album. It opens up with the Van Halen classic Running with the Devil, which is such an amazing way to open up this album, and it also features a couple of other Van Halen classics like their cover of the Kinks song You Really Got Me, as well as Ain't Talkin' About Love and Eruption, which is one of the most legendary solo guitar blowout tracks of all time, and a track that perfectly encapsulates Eddie Van Halen's genius and innovations on the guitar. And for 1978, some of the techniques that he is utilizing are so fresh and so ahead of their time, and he would go on to influence an entire generation of guitar players. So an absolutely incredible side 1 to this record. Side 2 then delivers another 6 amazing tracks with a couple of more classic hits like Jamie's Cryin', Ice Cream Man, and On Fire, as well as a couple of really solid B-sides. And all of these songs are filled with tasty guitar riffs, great drum grooves, awesome bass lines, great and energetic vocals from David Lee Roth, and introducing the listener to those classic Van Halen vocal harmonies between David Lee Roth and bassist Michael Anthony. And to me, those vocal harmonies are such a key ingredient to the Van Halen sound, and we hear it all throughout this record. And in my opinion, this is the best album of the entire Van Halen discography. I do not think they could have come out with a better debut studio album. The way it showcases Eddie Van Halen's incredible virtuosic guitar playing and the amount of hits that came out of this record are really just mind-blowing. And like I said, for any aspiring guitar player, I would say this album is required listening. I cannot say enough good things about Eddie Van Halen and how innovative and influential he was as a guitar player. So that is my number 3 album. Now on to number 2. Okay, for my number 2 album, I went with The Man Machine by Craftwork. This is my personal favorite album from Craftwork's discography. I think this record is perfect from front to back. All 6 songs are absolutely amazing. It's got a great pacing to it, and it's a very easy listen. If somebody wanted an introduction to Craftwork, I think this would be the perfect record to give to them. I think it's very digestible, and I think it showcases all of the best sides of their songwriting. Stylistically, it is a great blend of electronic, synth pop, and new wave, and clearly an album that would have a big influence on the emerging genres that would become much more prevalent in the decade of the 80s. This record has a pretty eerie and spooky sort of vibe to it, which is one of the things that I love about it so much. I think that is a mood that Craftwork can capture particularly well, and it's got 2 of the most classic Craftwork hits with The Robots and The Model. But the other 4 songs I think are all equally as incredible. The synth sounds are amazing. The pacing from track to track feels great, and I think each song works off of one another beautifully. And I really like when we get a little detour from the dark and eerie mood of this album. It makes those contrasting moods that more effective because it's happening more sparsely. And I just think everything about this record is absolutely incredible. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts on Craftwork's entire discography, I did a video ranking all of of their studio albums. So if you're interested in hearing that, be sure to check out the tier list playlist, which will be linked in the comments and the description. So that is my number 2 album, and now for the grand reveal, here is my number 1 favorite album of 1978. Okay, my favorite album of 1978 is Hermit of Mink Hollow by Todd Rundgren. I'm a huge Todd Rundgren fan, and he has released a lot of studio albums from the early 70s to the present day. And of his over 20 album studio discography, this is my number 1 favorite record of his. I think it is a perfect album from front to back, and it showcases all of the strengths of Todd Rundgren between his amazing songwriting, the great production that he does, and the fact that he's playing every instrument on this album. Stylistically, it's in sort of a general pop and art pop sort of realm, but it does veer off into some different stylistic territories on certain tracks, which adds a nice little element of surprise throughout the track listing, but it's all done in a very cohesive manner. The album is 12 tracks long with 6 songs on each side. Side 1 is perfect from front to back in my opinion. I love the way it opens up with All the Children Sing. In my opinion, that is one of the best opening tracks of any Todd Rundgren album. And side 1 also features his classic hit Can We Still Be Friends? And side 1 features a great blend of a couple of pop ballads mixed with a few experimental rock tracks, and concludes with more of a straight up late 70s rock track that actually does remind me a little bit of Van Halen, especially with the vocal harmonies. And each one of these songs complement each other so beautifully. Side 2 then features another incredible 6 songs that follow a similar stylistic roadmap, with my personal favorites on side 2 being the piano ballads, which is a style of writing that I think Todd Rundgren does exceptionally well. And the record concludes with my number 1 favorite song from this album, titled Fade Away. In my opinion, this is the best closing track of any Todd Rundgren album. An absolutely beautiful song that has great production, colorful chords and vocal melodies, and also a really cool bridge. So just everything that you want in a great Todd Rundgren song, and the best possible track that he could have chosen to conclude this absolutely masterpiece of an album on. So as you can see, I have nothing but good things to say about this record, and the fact that Todd Rundgren was still capable of producing an album of this high quality on his 8th studio record of his discography, I think is a very impressive thing. And like I said, it showcases every side of Todd Rundgren's genius, from the production to the musicianship and the songwriting. And if you're interested in hearing my full thoughts of Todd Rundgren's full discography, I also have a video where I rank all of his studio albums. So if you're interested in checking that out, that will also be linked in the tier list playlist, which is in the comments and the description, so be sure to check that out. So that is my number 1 favorite album of 1978. So to recap, at number 5, we had One Nation Under a Groove by Funkadelic. At number 4, we had Ambient 1 Music for Airports by Brian Eno. At number 3, we had Van Halen's debut self-titled studio album. At number 2, we had The Man Machine by Craftwork. And at number 1, we had Hermit of Mink Hollow by Todd Rundgren. If you haven't heard any of these records before and you check them out, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. I would love to see what you think of these. And I would also love to see what your top 5 albums of 1978 are as well. So be sure to leave your lists in the comments. All right, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for my top 5 favorite albums of 1979. I'll see you then. Take care.